Hi everyone, it's Dexter from A2K, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Revit Copy Monitor Workflows for MEP. Technical consultant Brendan Upton will be presenting for us today. So before we start, we'll just go through about A2K. We're all about fostering innovation through consulting and training. A2K Technologies plays a vital role in helping infrastructure, building, mining, construction, architecture, and manufacturing industries reach their full potential by delivering complete technology solutions and support services such as education and consulting. We work with visionaries to shape the future of design and in turn enable them through innovation to minimize risks, improve productivities and achieve excellence. A2K Technologies is considered the business partner of choice and trusted advisor by vendors and clients. We partner with major software and hardware vendors to meet our clients' technology needs. We strive to exceed client expectations by understanding their challenges and delivering solutions through experience and innovation. We work with clients and companies of any size nationally and abroad. Over to you, Brendan.
Thanks very much, Dexter. And hi, everyone. So let's get right into it today for this webinar. So this webinar is going to be running through the copy monitor process in Revit. So let's just go through a quick agenda. So I'm going to go through an overview of the copy monitor tool. And I'm assuming that most of you on the line there today are hopefully, if not fairly familiar, at least you're aware of the copy monitor tool, particularly in the MEP. In the MEP workflow, the copy monitor tool is generally recognized as being best practice to at least copy the levels on the grids. Okay, so I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with that workflow in your projects. If not, you hopefully should get a bit out of this in terms of the overview of the copy monitor tool. So I'll go through the basics of the levels on the grids. Just want to chat on that just quickly. Then I want to get into the main part of this webinar where I want to talk about the actual MEP coordination settings that can be found in the copy monitor tool. Okay, so there's some settings in there that allow you to copy the MEP fixtures across. There's a few different workflows. I also want to talk about batch copy process. And once I've gone through that, I want to just do a live demo and I'll demonstrate those features. And we'll allow some time for questions at the end. So feel free, guys, to add some questions into the chat area on your Zoom panel. But otherwise, let's kick on. Okay, so an overview of the copy monitor tool. The copy monitor tool is found on the Collaborate tab. And the copy monitor tool generally allows you to monitor and coordinate changes to elements that affect teams from different disciplines. So the copy monitor elements allow you to copy between a host project, your host project, and a linked model, or within the one project. Okay, what we're going to focus on in today's webinar is generally that workflow of a host and a linked model. Okay, in this case specifically, I'm going to be talking mainly about an MEP project that is referencing a linked architectural model and talk a little bit about that workflow. Okay, you know, the monitoring features of the tool as well, when you bring those elements in, allow you to monitor the changes to elements. So if things move, for example, in the architectural file, you can be notified. Okay, so Revit will flag it for you. You do have the ability then to collaborate, adapt those design changes or resolve the issues. Okay, you can see here on the screen, and I'm assuming you guys are fairly familiar with the ability to be able to copy onto those main 5 categories there: levels, grids, columns, walls, and floors. Okay, so as I said, generally in the MEP workflow, levels and grids is a typical practice out there. Okay, if I go to the next slide, the MEP users will typically share the coordinates when they're working with an architectural model and they're linking that in to set up their project. Typically, almost commonly out there, they will share the coordinates and then they will copy monitor those levels and the grids from that architectural model. From there, they're able to produce their views from those copied architectural levels. and then obviously keep that project coordinated and positioned. Okay, so for those of you on the line that are not aware, I will go through a very sort of basic example, at least show you where it is once I jump into the live demo of the levels on the grids. But I want to jump into the MEP coordinates. But basically, you select the link, and you have the ability to copy those elements in. Okay, so if it's levels in the grids, they become monitored so that if something moves, if the architect moves the level in their project, in their model file, then Revit will flag it for you because it maintains that monitoring position. Okay, so that's a typical scenario, the levels on the grids. I'm hoping that most of you are familiar with that, as I said. Let's jump over to now talk a little bit about this might be the sort of the lesser known area of the Copy Monitor tool, and that is the coordination settings. Okay, so the coordination settings button, which can be found within the Copy Monitor tools when you are in the Copy Monitor mode. Okay, it opens up this dialog box, which you can see an example of on the screen. And what this does is it gives you the ability to pull the MEP fixtures from the architectural models. So we're not just talking about levels and grids now. We're actually through this part of the tool where we have the ability to pull in those MEP fixtures. And you can see the example there, the list in the screenshot there. That's a list of the MEP categories that you can, the MEP fixture categories and elements and items that you can bring across. Okay, and what I want to drill into, and we'll go into in the live demo, is just a little bit about the actual mapping behavior, because you can do just a straight copy, or you can take it a bit further and you can actually have the ability to specify the types and essentially swap those fixtures out for your own. Okay, in this example I'm going to use today, we're going to be looking at plumbing fixtures, specifically toilets or water closets. Okay, and you have the ability to fit them out. So what I want to sort of get at is that often is the case from the architectural model, they might be placing fixtures, say basins and toilets, etc., plumbing fixtures in their model, but they invariably are not smart families. And in other words, they don't have those MEP connectors, those pipe connectors, etc., that you need on those families to be able to connect your pipe design up to. Okay, so this is where this comes in, the ability to copy the positions of those fixtures, but swap them out for the families in your model, so that you have the connectors that you require. And that's what I'm going to show you an example of. Okay, as I said, we're going to be looking at plumbing fixtures for this demo, but everything I'm going through applies to whichever fixture it might be. So it might be lighting devices, you might be pulling through, electrical fixtures. You could potentially use this workflow for any of those items on that list there. Okay. There is also the ability to do a batch copy as well. So I want to demonstrate a little bit of that as well. And it's all in you'll see in the coordination settings dialog box. You have these settings around the copying behavior and the mapping behavior. So we'll run through this quickly today, and we'll just have a look at some examples of how it works. Okay. All right. So let's jump right into Revit. So let me switch over. Okay. If we have a look here, I've got an example of just a sample building here. Okay. I've created some drainage floors, and I don't have too much content in here for the purposes of this exercise or for this demonstration. But what I've got some toilets down here sitting in the bathroom area. Now, what it is at the moment is this is a linked architectural file. Okay, those toilet fixtures are coming from the architectural model. Okay, so if I flip over to my architectural model, okay, in this session here, you can see that these are the toolets that have been placed in the architectural model, but they are not smart. In other words, they do not have the MEP connectors on them, okay, which is often the case. And this might be a reason why people might just firstly take a look at this tool at the surface and then think, well, no, there's no real point in copying them over because I'm not going to be able to connect pipes to them, okay? But what I want to show you now is that potentially you do have the ability to swap them out for your own families, but still maintain the positions, okay? And when we get to the end, I'll talk a little bit about, there are some drawbacks like anything, okay? So there are some limitations and there are things to be aware of that could happen. And hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate a few of those things as well. But hopefully by the end of this could be something, this could be a workflow that you could explore or that you could at least try to leverage for your projects, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate a few things here. If I jump back into this model, okay, if we talk about the levels and the grids, okay, as I said, these levels and the grids have already been copy monitored from this architectural model, and this project has been set up, okay? So if I select one of these grids, as is a typical workflow in MEP here, you can see that this grid is monitoring the grid from the architectural model. You can see that by the little icon that appears, okay? So any copy monitored element in your file, if it is currently, if the monitoring is active, you will see that little icon appear when you select those elements, okay? Similarly, if I go to a section view, okay, these levels are being monitored as well. Okay, so you can see the little icon that appears there. It's a little bit small, but you can see a little monitoring symbol. Okay, and you get the stop monitoring button up on the ribbon. Okay, so this project has been set up in that typical fashion. If I jump back to my plan view, if I go to the Collaborate tab, I can go now to the Copy Monitor tool. Now the process goes, I'm using the Select Link option here. This workflow is not really concerned with the using current project. This workflow is for linked models, which is the typical way that you would be using this tool generally out there, the way that users are using it, okay, in the industry. So I'm using the Select Link option, and if I select the link, okay, this puts me into the copy monitor mode. So you can see my ribbon has some copy monitor buttons. I have a finish and a cancel button. So I'm in the process now and I do whatever I need to do in this copy monitor process. And then I either have to finish to commit that out or I can cancel to come back out again. Okay. So when you're in the copy monitor mode, just to show you, for those of you that may not be aware, just quickly, if you generally just want to do a copy of the grids and levels, generally your workflow would be you would come into here and you would select copy, and you would simply just work your way through and copy the grids from a plan view or the levels from a section view. Okay, and then they maintain that monitoring. Then you can set up your views from those levels coming from the architectural model, for example, and you can remove any redundant views or views that existed there when you started your project. Okay, so that's the typical sort of workflow to get those levels and the grids and the positions of the building set up. Let's now jump over and have a look at these coordination settings. Okay, so this might be an area that you may not have be so familiar with. Okay, so if I jump over to the coordination settings here, all right, this is where I can access the MEP fixture settings here. So you can see the list here of all the different fixtures that you can work with this tool. Okay, as I said, I'm going to focus for today just on the plumbing fixtures just as an example, but you can apply these workflows to any of these categories. Okay, so if I've got I select the category that I want here to work with. So in this case, plumbing fixtures. And I can have a look at the mapping behavior here, okay? So I simply leave this as is, in other words, the default settings. So just copy individual and just copy original, okay? What I'm gonna get is, if I close that out and I just come back into my copy tool, if I zoom down into my bathroom area, and I'll just copy that first one, okay? that has now copied an instance of that toilet into my model, the exact same family. So it's basically pulled that exact family from the architectural model, placed it in our project, and it is now maintaining that monitoring of it. So if it moves and whatnot, okay. So similar, exactly the same as what you've possibly done with the grids and your levels, okay. It's same process, it's just that it's a different family, okay. So that's all well and good. But I'm sure most of you are saying, well, that's fine, but there's no connectors on it. If I finish that, what's it really doing for me? Yes, I can, maybe have a bit more graphical display control over it in my model. But what am I really going to be able to do with this? It's got no connectors. I'm not going to be able to draw pipe, connect my pipe work up to it. Okay, so this is where that mapping behavior and that swapping out tool comes into play. So if I jump back into my copy monitor tool, let's do another example. So collaborate tab, copy monitor, select link. If I jump back to the coordination settings here, this time I'm going to select the plumbing fixtures and I'm going to drill into the mapping behavior. And this time I'm going to choose this second option, which says specify type mapping. When I have that activated, this now gives me the ability to swap those families out for one of my own families, okay? So down here, you can see I've now got the type mapping has appeared under the plumbing fixtures. And if I select that, I can now basically tell Revit which family I want to swap for the linked one, okay? So it will list any families that it sees in your model, okay? And any fixtures, and there's basically two columns here. The first column is the families from the link model, and the second column is your family. So yours is the host model, okay? So we're just going to focus on the toilets here. So I actually want to swap it out. If I click on the pull down menu here, this should list for me. Revit will identify all of the families, applicable families that are loaded into my project and that are available that I can swap out to. So you can see I've got a few here. I've got a couple of examples, but for now, I'm just going to go with this floor mounted one. Okay. I'm going to click save and close on that. And if I now come over and choose the copy command again, and I copy the second toilet, can you see what's happened? It's now copied and it's monitoring and it's copied the position, but it's not pulled the architectural family and it's swapped it out for my family, which actually has the connectors on it. Okay. So if we have a look at the 3D view, you can see there's the toilet, coming from the architectural model. Okay. And this one here highlighted in blue is the one I've just brought in. Okay. So it's going to maintain the position, but it's allowing me to use my own family. So what that means is I can now, for example, have the ability to, connect and draw my pipe up to it. Okay. If I jump back over to the copy monitor tools here, I have to make sure that I actually finish this to commit it. Okay. And then if I select it, I can right click and I can start to add my design in, whatever's happening here, I can start to add pipe work to that. Okay. If something moves though and shifts, it will notify it for me. Okay. So there's a few things to be aware of in this process. Okay. So you need to ensure that the family that you're swapping in has the same orientation and is the same setup. So if it's a wall-based, face-based family, or if it's a freestanding family, you may get some variations. So sometimes you may need to, if you want to use this process, you may need to change the insertion points of your families. Or if one comes in, and it's a little bit off, you can move it back into position and just maintain that as a difference. Okay, and I'll show you those notifications in a sec. But that's the other thing. But if it's a face-based family coming into swapping from a floor-mounted, like freestanding family, then you'll get a scenario like this. Okay, so this is something to be aware of. If I jump back into my copy monitor tool, let me just get my zoom panel out of the way here. I'll quite sure what Zoom's doing there at the moment. But if I jump up to my Collaborate tab and I go back into the Copy Monitor tool, okay, if I actually go back into those coordination settings and I select my plumbing fixture type mapping and I swap it out for, I have an example of a wall of like a face-based wall-mounted family here. Well, it's not, it's face-based, okay? So it's looking for a host. If I swap it out for that one, if I go out now, go copy, okay, I'm going to get something like that. Okay, so not ideal. So that's something you need to be aware of. Okay, so this could be something that hinders the workflow. But if you know that you've got some tiles that, some families that match the orientation, you should be able to streamline this. And the other point to make here as well is that this also opens up the opportunity to have a conversation with the architect. Okay, on a project, it may not always be possible, but if there's an opportunity, you can start up a dialogue, and there may be some opportunity for you to share some of these fixture families for some projects with the architect. So as they put them in, you can be assured that you're actually just swapping out your own families. Okay, so that's or at least get the insertion points in the same position. So there could be a conversation there that you could work with. Okay. All right. Let me cancel that. In fact, let me finish that so that one remains, just so we can see that one. Okay. Let me go back to the floor plan. Okay. If I jump back up to the Copy Monitor tool one more time, I want to just quickly show you this batch copy option. Okay, so in the Copy Monitor tool, directly next to the coordination settings dialog or button that we've been looking at, there is a batch copy button. Okay, this tool allows you to copy all the fixtures in one go. Okay, now this sounds good on the surface, and it is, but it is, again, like anything, there's something, you've got to be aware what's going to happen. If you don't change some of the settings, or if you're not aware of some of the settings of what you've got set up in the coordination settings, you will get every type of fixture, not just that might exist in the architectural model, and some of them you may not want. Okay, so what you have the ability to do, if you drill back into the coordination settings for each of these categories, okay, you have the ability to, with the copy behavior setting, to ignore that category. Okay, or allow the batch copy. Okay, so for ones that you don't want to, you never want to bring in, just click on an ignore category and leave it as that. Okay, but for ones that maybe you do want to try and bring in and even do as a batch, so let's say these plumbing fixtures, you would set those ones to allow batch copy. Okay, so you'd work your way through the list, ignore the ones you don't want, and then set the ones you do want if you want to use that batch copy to allow batch. Okay, so you set that one up as is. Let me just double check this, the mapping behavior here. So I'm going to go back into the specified type mapping. Yep, so that's still set. I'm going to go one more time back into the type mapping to make sure that I'm going to get that floor mounted one. I don't want to get the one that's going to come in the wrong orientation. So I'm going to swap it back for this floor mounted one in this example. Okay. If I click save and close on that, I should now be able to, instead of having to individually pick each one, I can come across here and click the batch copy button. And I have a couple of options here. If I want to go back and make changes at this point to that type, that mapping behavior that we were just looking at, I could do that by clicking this first button. If I'm confident that I've done that already and I'm ready to go, I can just simply click the second option, which is we'll just copy the fixture. So if you keep your eye on the screen, this should copy the remaining ones that have not been copied. Okay. All right, so you can see it's copied those three, the remaining ones. Okay, so remember that there's one already copied here, albeit the wrong one. There was one already copied here, and this first one was already copied, but it was just the architectural family. Okay, so that's the batch copy command in a nutshell. So that is pretty much the workflow to go with. Okay, a couple of quick things to keep in mind before we jump into a bit of allow a bit of a time for some questions. I can see there's a couple coming in already. Okay, If I jump back to, if I just finish that and I'll jump back in. So one more time, select link. Okay. So remember that you've got your copy monitor options will just deal with the 5 main ones, which are like your architectural and structural type elements, you know, levels, grids, columns, walls, and floors. So this gives you the ability to drill in and change some of those settings that the way those elements come in. You know, you do have some mapping type behavior, limited sort of mapping type behavior as to what we were just looking at in the coordination settings there in this window, but it's not as broad. So, you know, if you feel free to kind of investigate this a bit further, you can have a look at what you can do. In my experience, I wouldn't say I've seen too many people, and even I myself, too many people ever really copied the columns, walls, and floors. I know there are some workflows out there where that does benefit, and I have seen it happen, but I've not seen it happen commonly. Okay, you know, typically it's the levels and the grids are the main ones for those main datum type items. Okay, some examples where you might do the walls and the floors could be, you know, if you're dealing with plant rooms, or you just want to get some structure into your model from either the architectural or even a structural model, then maybe you copy those in. But typically, I'd say I don't see too much of that happening around the place. But certainly the levels and the grids is definitely, the levels for that matter are fairly critical. Okay, you can get away with not bringing the grids in, but the levels is what allows you to create your views and make them coordinated to the architectural model. Okay. All right, coming back out of that window. Okay. A couple of things to be aware of. So if I just finish this, I'll just quickly give you an example of what happens if something moves. And I'm sure you may have seen this with the grids and levels scenario in a project previously. Very similar with these fixtures. You know, for example, if I jump into my architectural model and I make a change to one of these fixtures, maybe I even delete one of these. So maybe this cubicle comes off the end. You know, if I delete that, and let's delete that there, and we'll just bring that back. Okay, so I've deleted one toilet there. If I save that, and in fact, let's just so I can show you an example or not, let's just move. Let's just move one just slightly so we can see a bit of a, I know that's a bit offset there, but just so you get an idea of something being moved. Okay, so save that, and I'll jump back into my project. And if I reload the model, so reload. Okay, you'll get this this typical warning: instance of link needs a coordination review. Anytime you see anything to do with a coordination review warning, it's invariably something to do with those copy monitored elements. Okay, so if we have a look, we can see you know, there's where that cubicle was, that was deleted. So I've now got this toilet that I copied previously that's now no longer there, and this is the one that's moved. You can see it's flagging it for me. So I can, just like I might do with the grids and the columns, I can do the same process. I can select the link, jump into the coordination review dialog box, and I can see any of those issues here. So if this dialog is empty, then the model's all good. If you've got entries here, then there are there are things to fix in the model, the things that have shifted. Okay, so you can see I've got my plumbing fixture has been deleted, so that's this one here. So if I go to the actions there, I can just delete the element. Okay, so that clears that one up. Now that one's disappeared, it's gone. And I've also got some older ones there that I might have deleted as well. You can see some entries there from obviously setting up this model. Okay. Let's ignore those ones for the moment, but this one is the warning that's telling us that the plumbing fixture has moved, the relative position has changed. That's this one here. If I click into the column here, I can obviously, like I do get with the levels and the grids, I get options to postpone or eject. I don't generally want to do that. What I want to do is just ascertain that, yep, that's the new position. So I choose the fourth option, which should move it to the new position, and then that removes that as a warning. Okay. So that's an example of how Revit notifies you with these copy monitored elements. So, for those of you who have not seen that before, hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what happens. Okay. A couple other quick things just to be aware of. Okay, if the family that you're swapping out to in your model does not have a similar connector point, a similar insertion point. Let's say this insertion point is on the wall, okay, or the back of the family. Let's not look at that one. That's probably not the best example. Let's come down here. So let's say the insertion point's on the wall. You can see these ones are coming in cleanly. If the architectural family has got a connector and, not a connector, insertion point in the center of the family, and your one is at the sort of the back against the wall, then when you swap it out, your tool is going to be sitting offset. The insertion one is going to match the architectural one. Okay, so you will get a bit of a discrepancy there if those connectors are not in the same spot. So that is something definitely to be aware of. Can be a bit of a drawback for this workflow, and that, as I said earlier, is best resolved, I think, if you can have that conversation early in the project. If you want to try and leverage this workflow, have that conversation early if you can with the architect and say, can we have a bit of a discussion and a test with these fixtures and whatnot, where we might be able to copy these in. Okay. The other thing is, again, be aware of the face-based and the the orientation of your families, because that can have a bearing as well. Okay, and the other thing to just finish on before I jump into the questions, right, is you do have the ability to stop monitoring. Okay, so let's say you've and that may be another workflow why you want to use this. Maybe you don't want to copy these in and maintain monitoring. Maybe you just want to copy these in just to get them into your model into the right position really quickly, right? You can do this process. Copy them in, and then you've always got that stop monitoring button on any of your copy monitored elements, and that includes levels and grids as well, which generally you don't want to stop monitoring those, but you always got on copy monitored items this stop monitoring option. So if I simply select one and say stop monitoring, the little icon disappears. That family is now its own free family in my project. It has no relationship or monitoring with this toilet from the linked file. So I can now move it, free around. You can see I'm not getting any warning telling me that, something's moved, because it's now its own independent family. Okay. So you have the ability to do that as well. If you're finding it limiting that, things are moving and you don't want to be notified. Okay. For whatever reason. All right. Let's jump back out now. So what I want to do is open it up for some questions. I can see there's a couple that have come through already. Okay, so there's one there, the first one there from Trevor. G'day, Trevor. Which version was this made available? So this has been around for a little while. I think they've kind of added to the tool to a certain extent over the years, but it's certainly in some form you have been able to copy those MEP fixtures for quite a while, I'd say, quite early on, down 5 to sort of 10 versions back, sort of thing. It has been around there for quite a while. Okay, it's just not, as I said, not so commonly recognized, and so it's not a tool that is widely used. Okay, my thought on it is that yes, there are some drawbacks with using it. Like anything, it's the same as things to be aware of in Revit when you're using face-based families as opposed to freestanding families. There's pros and cons for both. There could be some drawbacks from doing this workflow, but even if it's just a matter of getting those copied in, or even the ability to as I said, you might be able to set up a project if you have a good relationship with the architect. You could share your families with them with the proper connection and get them to use your families from the get-go. Then once they've placed them in, you just batch copy, bang, everything's in, right? And just ignore the ones that they're not going to do. Okay. So anyway, that was a really long answer to that first question, but hopefully that sort of helps. Okay, the second question there was, how does it match the insertion point and orientation? Okay, hopefully I think I've kind of already answered that one in the demo. So definitely there is a bearing on where that insertion point is in the family. So it does need to kind of match a position. So as I said, if a insertion point is in a different position in each family, then it is just going to basically place your insertion point on the linked file family's insertion point. So if they are in sort of like a different position, if you know what I mean, it's going to sit off the wall, for example, that toilet. Okay, so you just have to be aware of that. Okay, what happens to the connected pipework when a fixture is moved or deleted? That's probably a bit of a drawback as well. Let's have a quick test on that one. If we go back into Revit, if I jump over into my architecture, so it's that one there that I've got the pipework on. So if I delete that toilet, I'll save that. This is where you may want to stop the monitoring. If it just says at the end of a project and you've got a major design in there, then maybe this is a point where you'd probably want to stop the monitoring as well. It's certainly something, I think this is probably more a tool that you're going to use at the early stages of a project to get fixtures in. Okay, incident link needs a review. That's what I would expect. Has found uncopied mock. So that's just to do with the batch copy. That's fine. I can close that one down. Okay. It won't get rid of the pipe work. Okay. That one will still be monitoring. So the pipe work is there. So what you would need to do is either, if it is to remain, right, and they've accidentally deleted it, what you would need to do is just either stop the monitoring or go into the coordination review. So if you went, so don't get sort of, I guess, too confused with if you go into the coordination review, okay, don't delete the element, because it'll obviously delete the element and potentially, I'll test it and see, but that would potentially remove the piping. What you want to do is, I think probably the best thing is actually not to do anything in here. You could sort of just postpone or reject, but if instead of doing anything in here, I think that, coming back out of this, I think the best step would be to just stop the monitoring. So select the fixture and simply stop the monitoring, okay? And that will just then make it an independent family. Let's just test what happens quickly. I'm conscious of the time here, but let's just quickly test what happens if I select all right, so element was deleted. This one, if I actually delete the element, what happens to the pipework? Okay, so the pipework doesn't remove, the fixture just removes, but the pipework stays there. Okay, so maybe it's doable, but hopefully that gives you a few little ideas of how you can make that work. Okay. Okay, so someone's saying on further to that as well that Revit will readjust the pipework. So yes, that potentially could happen, which may not be great. So perhaps the recommendation here would be, if you're going to sort of use this workflow, maybe it's something that you do use early on in the project to get fixtures in. Once you've got a fairly heavy design, you probably don't want them to maintain that monitoring at towards the end of the project. So you can maybe stop that monitoring perhaps down the track for those once you've got a large design and network of pipework in there, you don't want it to be sort of readjusting and moving things. Okay. Okay, so a message there about having potentially having some issues with GUID numbers conflicting. Okay, so that's fair enough. That could be something to be aware of. I've not come across that myself, but definitely something to be aware of. So keep that in mind. And yep, so the next one comment's just saying pretty much what I'm saying. So work it at a concept type stage of the project. So yes, agree. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, especially with mentioning sewer pipe, with graded pipe that's on a slope, you don't want to be messing around too much with that pipe work. So yeah, certainly with those ones, maybe you do break it later on in the design. So yep, that's a good point. Can you control the visibility of the copy monitored elements? Yeah, definitely. There's no difference with the visibility in that, they're still their own category in your model. Okay, so once they're copy monitored into your project, they're part of that your host model, right? They're part of your model, so you can control their visibility, their visibility graphics. You can control like you would control any other element. Okay, just be aware that when you go into visibility graphics, when you've got a linked model, okay, you do have that extra Revit links tab. Okay, so that's where you can start to differentiate between the two. By default, Revit just leaves it as by host. So if you make any visibility changes in your host, in your model, in the host, what is the host? The Revit link will just inherit and take that on board. Okay, unless you drill in here and you start setting those custom settings, then you're treating them independently of each other. Okay, and that's, I'm sure some of you would have experienced that workflow where with the levels and the grids, for example, once you copy monitor those levels in and the grids in, there are views where you don't want to see both, right? You want to turn the linked levels and grids off independently from the ones that are now copied into your project. Okay. Okay, I think that's, there's one more it looks like here. Can we copy monitor room tags from linked files? No, short answer to that is that's a different process. There is a way to get your if you use spaces. If I'm understanding that question correctly, Lionel, if I'm understanding your question correctly, what you're trying to do is get room tags into your model. If you use your spaces, so I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the spaces tool in Revit, but if you place your spaces in your model and there are rooms in exactly the same position in the architectural model, then those spaces will report those room names. And there's a tool in Revit called the space naming tool, and that allows you to copy that information over. Okay, so that's a totally separate workflow to this, but it is possible, but it's just not done with the copy monitor tool. Okay, no worries. Thanks, Lionel. Can categories for generic models and joinery be included? Okay, I see what you're getting at. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point, Lee. Yeah, so sometimes that could be a drawback as well, guys. So there's a comment there saying that, the architect, if they're not modeling, well, I guess if they're doing some kooky things like, as Lee says here, naming the joinery as a sink, or as a plumbing fixture, then there is going to be some some discrepancies there. So yeah, I guess coming back to the question, can the categories for generic models and joinery be included? Unfortunately, not. The short answer is no. It's just, yeah, they're not there. Basically, it's locked out to those categories that, if I go back into here, it's basically isolated to this list. Okay, so that's all you can work with. Okay, so unfortunately, generic models and joinery are not on there. So it is a good point. If the architect has, for whatever reason, put their sinks that they've placed in their model under like a joinery or a generic model category in their model, then yeah, this is going to fall over. You're not going to be able to copy them, unfortunately. Okay. All right, guys. I think that's probably it. I'll give it one more second as I flip back over to the slides. All right. So thanks very much for your time, guys. Appreciate you guys jumping on and joining us for this session. If you've got any questions, please reach out. If there's any questions that we didn't get to, I'm hoping that I kind of got through all of them there, as much as I could, and hopefully that's been helpful for you guys. But yeah, please reach out to us if we can help. This is the sort of stuff we can start to help with you further, take you through some of these workflows with upskilling and whatnot. Okay, so if you're interested in future events or any of these webinars that are coming up, that's the web page to visit, a2ktechnologies.com.au/events. So you can view our upcoming program of webinars and events that are coming up. Okay, and yeah, thank you for watching. If you need more information, there's a info at a2ktechnologies.com.au that you can reach out to. Yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate it.